What's up, everybody? This is Purpose Podcast, Episode 3, Worship with Purpose on Purpose. I'm your host, Janelle Lewis, and I'm here with pastor/music minister Brandon Cowden. I'm not even saying former anymore. And my husband and bassist and band leader, Xander Lewis. Our mission is to enrich church worship ministries with applicable, intentional, spiritual methods of functioning so that we can meet our ultimate calling of knowing God and making Him known. Today, we're going to talk about this word that's come up in praise and worship culture. I've seen it on a few posts. All of my Instagram feed and TikTok is like worship services and people praising God, playing their instrument. And I tend to rabbit hole on the comments. And I saw this comment, and I think it's, people are kind of using this as a criticism of contemporary worship. And the comment I'm saying is a buzzword, buzz meaning annoying, is emotional confusion. And basically criticizing the outward expression that we're seeing, not just that we're seeing now, but we're seeing a lot more of it now in contemporary worship, in more churches than, we're obviously Pentecostal. And so it's been around in Pentecost for quite some time, since the Bible, and since the book of Acts. So we're seeing it a lot more in contemporary worship in other denominations as well. And there's some criticism of it for some reason. And the little phrase I wanted to address was emotional confusion. And the first thing that popped into my head when I read that was, ain't nobody confused with the devil. Because that's the whole point, right? Praise will confuse the enemy. Who is that? Marvin Sapp.
Yeah.
Anyway, I thought I'd give you a chance to talk about it, or unless you want somebody else to go first. Okay, Pastor Brandon. I guess we're just gonna stick with that.
Yeah. So, when it comes to this, the first thing that came to my mind when you read this, or as you're speaking on this, was Michal, David's wife. And David was dancing before the Lord, and she was looking out the window, and she was like, "You look like a fool," basically. And David was like, "Well, I'm gonna be a fool for Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm gonna worship. I don't really care, what people think, and I'm gonna worship." And David had just had an experience with God right before this, where he was wanting to take the tabernacle or the ark back into Jerusalem, and he carried it on a cart, and the cart shifted, and someone touched it and died, and he was upset at God for this. He was mad, and he was like, "Well, man, how should we do this?" Well, God had a specific plan on how the ark should be moved. It shouldn't be on the back of an animal; it should be on the back of men. And so when he got to take it back into Jerusalem the second time, it was on the backs of men, and every 6 paces he worshiped God, and he danced before the Lord. And when he was in the city, his wife looks out and sees him, and she's like, "You're acting like a fool." And God didn't take kindly to that. The Bible says she was barren after that,
right?
And that was a big deal in those days. Not being able to have children. Man, that was a gut punch. To women of that day. I mean, even in this day, but especially then. And so, David didn't care. David was a man after God's own heart, and he worshiped. And I don't know how it could be. What was it? Emotionally confusing?
Yeah, emotional confusion.
Emotional confusion. So, and that itself is kind of odd, right? So, is he or she saying that my emotions I'm feeling this in the atmosphere, but I don't know what to do, like how is it emotionally confusing, I guess. And we're about feeling the presence of the Lord and worshiping God, and that's what it's about for us. So I don't see it as emotional confusion, or I don't say, it's not about others either.
Right. And it, to me, it's not confusing, right? If I'm the person worshiping that way, to me, it's not confusing. I can see how it could be confusing to somebody that doesn't understand what God has done for me.
Right.
And it's like, 1 Peter 2:9, chosen generation, royal priesthood, holy nation, peculiar people. For what reason? To show forth the praises of God. And so if we're going to be a peculiar people, if we're going to like live by those titles, then the whole purpose is, if we're going to be peculiar, it's to show forth the praises of God, and that's fine. And it might look a little weird. It might look a little confusing, but the Bible says that's what it is, right? Peculiar. Yeah. Anything?
Amen. Sorry, I'm just confused by the, like, how it's confusing. You know what I'm saying?
I mean,
I'm confused by it too.
Yeah, I think so. I'm sitting here like thinking about it. I think it's somebody trying to dig at the possibility of praise and worship music being manipulative.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. That, I guess that kind of makes sense.
I get it. I mean, especially if you're like, as I see like other like super huge churches, no shade to them, but like, I guess in the fact like the music, with the lighting, with the darkness, I guess, is that what they feel like? Is that what's being manipulated, like people's feelings?
That, and then the other end of it, the hype.
The hype. I mean, we've heard this example a bunch, but the same will be in the sports industry. Right? You go to a game and your team is losing, but you're still cheering. That's emotionally confusing for me. I don't know. I'm very confused. Like, I'm emotionally confused.
Or like when your team's losing, you playing basketball and your teammate's smiling like, "Hey man, why you smiling when you losing?"
Yeah.
Get in the game.
Can't just be happy anymore.
Yeah, get in the game, right? So yeah, I think, I mean, I guess, it's we don't understand. We're not like, hey, don't do that. That's emotionally confusing. When we praise God, my praise is my praise to God. And so now if you want to get into like, is it genuine or not genuine? That's a whole nother subject.
Yeah,
it is.
Right.
Yeah, like what is manufactured,
right,
versus what is authentic and coming from God, from you, authentic praise coming from you to God.
Yeah, I think a point of confusion is a lot of Christian artists are in the news, and they're like, well, these are Christian artists, but they're at the Grammys and they're singing worship music and secular music.
Mm-hmm.
How is that? My thing is this: it's always like, it gives Christians a bad name, but my thing is always, you'll know them by their fruits, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, if you can speak in tongues all you want or whatever, but if you don't have the fruit of the Spirit,
or maybe the person asks this question or like making the statement, like maybe they're confused of what they're feeling. You know what I'm saying? Like, what does this mean? Like, why am I feeling this type of way? So let me go and make this accusation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're scared of what we don't understand.
Yeah.
For sure.
Just historically, human beings are scared of what they don't understand.
Yeah, for sure. I think so.
And it's hard. God is not an understandable entity in fullness, really.
Yes.
So we just have to accept some things are unexpected. Some things are not what we deem as appropriate, just like the whole story of David's wife. She didn't deem that appropriate, and then God didn't deem her appropriate.
Right.
So then,
and there's many stories in the Bible where it was out of the blue,
Mm-hmm.
Blind Bartimaeus,
and then
he's
also
screaming.
people just like shush.
Yeah. So there are people that felt emotionally attacked back then too, But I mean, people busting open roofs to get this, lame man down to,
See Jesus.
see a sick man down to Jesus, and it's like, man, what do. So I guess like if you're that place where you're emotionally confused and you haven't had a need yet that
right.
would take you to that point. Because when you're desperate,
Mm-hmm.
when you reach a point of desperation, I think, like when God is your only option, it's a game changer.
Definitely.
And most of us, if you're in a country like we live in, where you have so many freedoms, we don't often experience that moment where like God is our only option.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
then like
God will take you
being
there.
at a point, being at a point where you're confused, is like this gives you the opportunity to seek and like really understand, read about it, and see what this is about. You know what I'm saying? Be curious about God and see what He reveals to you.
For sure.
Yep. And a lot of it is pride.
Yeah.
Coming from the person that's emotionally confused is probably a little prideful. So speaking of pride, we have this little question here. Well, it's kind of like a concern. I feel like I have to do, and I'm so sorry for saying speaking of pride, because it may not have been from that point. I feel like I have to do every task for things to go smoothly, even if I'm not the music leader. But I do think if we're stepping back, it might be a little pride thing. And I don't want to go all stereotypical Martha Mary situation. There could be two places that it's coming from. One, a place of control freak pride, or two, some letdown pride from your leadership, and maybe things are collapsing and there's some unsupportive leadership and you're trying to make up for that. But what would you say to that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, I try to look at it from different perspectives, right? Of a person that might be frustrated. I've been frustrated in ministry. Where it's like, man, the goal is this. The goal is, we're like, man, we want to do something great for God, and you feel like somebody's holding you back, somebody above you, leadership, pastor, music minister, whatever, and you're the only one holding it together. And so I think that it's an interesting place to be in. And I also think that I try to have a little empathy there. But I'm reminded of two things. I'm reminded of Elijah, who's like, I'm the only one who hasn't kneeled to Baal. I'm the only one that God is using. And God's like, yeah, I've got like 7,000 other people that haven't knelt to Baal. I think it was 7,000. I'm not sure.
We can look up the number.
Yeah, I think it was. I want to say it was 7,000. Like I have 7,000 that hasn't knelt down to Baal, and you're not the only one that's living for me, And so it was kind of a reality check, I think, for Elijah.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we need to think about it like that. Like, okay. You're not the only one going through this first, but God sees where you are.
Yeah.
Like that's the main thing. Like it's like God's not unaware of your situation or where you are. Like He knows that you're in that place, but you don't know why you're there.
Yeah.
You don't know if you're there for a purpose, to serve a purpose, to help someone else.
Yeah.
And so and then the second thing, I was a scripture in Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 5. And it says, slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear and with sincerity of heart, just as you would obey Christ. Obey them not only to win their favor when their eye is on you, but as slaves of Christ. And this word slaves is servants in this context, okay? So not actual slaves.
Just to clarify that.
Servants or like, we'll call them volunteers.
There you go.
Doing the will of God from your heart. So, but as slaves of Christ or servants of Christ, doing the will of God from your heart, serve wholeheartedly as if you were serving the Lord, not people.
Yeah.
Because you know that the Lord will reward each one for whatever good they do, whether they are slaves or free. Okay? And so, that scripture always stuck out to me. Don't worry about what leaders and everything else is happening. You serve God and you worry about serving God. And I think if you focus on Him, it'll take some of the frustration out because you're just like, I'm just serving the Lord. And let the Lord lead you to what's next.
Yeah.
Is it, some people are like, well, am I supposed to leave here? You need to hear that from the Lord. And I believe people in your life, I believe that there's safety in a multitude of counselors. So you need to have good people in your life that are not biased, that you can talk to, and then those people will give you some direction, and ultimately God will put the right people in your life to say the right thing so you know what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've been in both. Oh, man, I feel like it would really hurt my heart to know that somebody under my leadership felt that way. So I don't know that I've been in heard somebody say that to me. But I have felt that frustration before and not necessarily about my leadership, just feeling like the weight of the world is on my shoulders to get through the service or to get through this segment of time in the service. So it's just, again, it goes back to who are you serving? Like you said, like, am I serving my own desires and ambition and what I think is appropriate and what I think we need to be doing?
Yeah.
Or am I focusing on serving God in this moment? And so it's the feeling is validated because multiple people experience it, but it's not something that is okay to stay on and dwell in.
Yeah, because if you do stay there, you're just going to breed bitterness there.
Definitely.
So that's where it gets super dangerous.
Yeah, that's tough. It's tough, but prayer, counsel, and talking to leadership probably too, in an earnest way, not in a demanding way or anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, fully agree. I mean, there's times where a Sunday or so on either altar or wherever we're on the song, I feel like, we've we've argued here and there about it, but just me come to understanding like I'm serving God, where I feel like we need to go here, but you're the one who put the set list together, you're the ones leading. I mean, you're the ones calling. Okay, let's go here, let's stay here for the moment. As for the church, you know what I'm saying? Because this is where God has it right now. This is where we need to stay at, instead of like let's go to the bridge, let's go to the chorus, let's just stay right here. So that's something I'm trying to work on and pray
So
on.
in that vein, what would you say to worship leaders or people that are in charge of music ministry positions? How do you deal with when you feel like someone, like sometimes it's feeling of threatening or like you feel like they're like not on board or whatever, or how do you make sure you foster an environment for people to feel like they can grow or have an opinion even? Like, does the buck stop with you?
That's
Like,
hard, yeah.
Is it like it's your way or the highway?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that it's when you're in leadership, I'm trying to remember that quote about, the best leaders recognize their weaknesses and try to highlight other strengths in those areas.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're operating in that capacity, then that already opens the door for people to give their opinions and their thoughts. And so I think, man, I feel like I'm blessed at this church because we don't have a singer that has a diva attitude.
Yeah.
We don't have somebody that's out saying, I should really be singing that solo. We're not experiencing that.
Yeah.
And
I think it's just because of the trust. Of course, because of the pastor, but it falls down. You know what I'm saying? The pastor to the leaders, and then
I think that's a big
culture.
one.
It's a culture,
Culture.
Yeah.
And being like, as a music minister, being submissive to your leadership, and then your people are seeing that. And I can't say that that's something that has always been a strength of mine. And it's probably will never be a strength. It'll probably be something that I'm always fighting my flesh on, because I really, really like to have control. But yeah, I think that you can. There's a really good phrase. I was watching this TED Talk. It was about classical music, but the concept is the same as who am I being that the people that I'm leading, their eyes are not shining. So he was talking about that in a capacity of being a music teacher. But I was thinking about that in the capacity of being a music minister and like, who am I being that the people that are serving in this ministry are not zealous about it, are not wanting to be involved. Like, who am I being that they're feeling that way from that standpoint? That's a lot of pressure. Yeah. I might not say that that's something that everybody needs to ask themselves. I felt like I needed to ask myself that.
Yeah.
But I think it's valid because you are in leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a tough place to be in, I think, too, especially when someone comes in that you feel like has more talent than you do. A lot of people struggle in that area where somebody comes in and you're like, man, they're actually better than me.
Yeah.
So when I was in a church, there was a guy who was playing bass, and he just started playing bass, just like he was like, I'll give it a go. So I was like, all right, well then, man, he just started getting really good. And one day he was like, we were doing a run in a song, and he's like, oh yeah, it's just the same thing an octave apart, same 5 notes an octave apart. And I was like, no, it's not. It's not the same thing, an octave apart. And like I went back, I had to play it for something else, and it was exactly what he said it was. I had to make a choice at that point. I said, "Man, do I acknowledge that?"
Yeah.
And I did. So at the next band rehearsal we had, I was like, "Hey guys, he was right, you know." And turns out he had a better ear than I did. He had an incredible ear, and so I used that. And I didn't have a problem with them. Like, bro, you got a better ear than me. Like, let's talk about this section. What do you hear right here? What are you doing right here? Whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that. But some people get intimidated by people that have more talent.
Yeah.
But that breeds stagnation, I think. If you don't, use someone's ability to their fullest ability, you're just hurting yourself.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
And the ministry.
Yeah.
And in the capacity that we're functioning in the kingdom, because it's a big job and it's a lot of humility.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that part can get forgotten with our own ambition being factored in.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a heavy topic, but we're going to try and move on to our pulpit or playlist segment. We have 3 songs today. The first one is Hold of Me by James Wilson. I don't know how to say my man's name. Something Jackson. Jakin?
Jakin. I think it's Jakin.
Is it Jakin?
I think so.
Somebody let us know. Not trying to be rude. I'm sorry. But I think it's a super fun song. I really like listening to it in the car. And I think that it is, excuse me. I think that it is appropriate for your pulpit. I'm going to choose not to have it on our pulpit because those BGVs are high. And we're not in an abundance of male worship leaders right now. So I think that's another thing to think about.
Yeah, I think it's a huge thing to think
Yeah.
about. Yeah, so I think, would it work in a worship service? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But you might have to make some modifications to it, maybe a key change, whatever.
That too,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
or
a
just
possibility.
rearranging vocals, which
Rearranging
if you don't
vocals.
have time for that, which most of us don't, especially if you're working a full-time job
Yeah.
and doing music ministry.
It can be a lot of work. So yeah, I mean, I think it can work in the pulpit for sure. I think you could do the song. I think it's a great song. But yeah, I mean, when you got to kind of figure out what your group is capable of, and then if you need to make some changes. I mean, some of it is as simple as flipping the parts down, right? Everybody does it actually in oh man, what's this song from Todd Delaney?
When I call your
Yeah, when
name.
I call your name. Yeah. No one does that flip. And then when you tell people like, oh, it's a flip, they're like, no, it's not. Like, no, it is. They're in the rafters,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you make changes to it. But I think it's a great song.
Yeah.
It is fun. So in that same vein, both of these songs actually have the word undignified in them when they're talking about praise, which, is appropriate because we were talking about emotional confusion. Anyway, Ask Me Why by Michael Bethany. For me, that one's a little more accessible. Vocally, congregational singing wise.
Yeah.
And I like them both equally. I think I would like to jam them both in my car just as much as the next song. But I think this one for me is a little more accessible for our team, and same kind of concept about, just praising God with all I have and not caring what anybody not caring about what my neighbors thinking about my worship. And yeah. Ask me why.
It's a fun song. Pulpit. I've seen a lot of churches do it small, big.
Mhm.
Pulpit.
Yeah, I think pulpit too. I mean, Michael Bethany, he's awesome.
Shout out to South Lake, Texas.
I didn't realize.
He's
Yeah,
there?
I didn't. Yeah,
Yeah, that's the church. Gateway Church.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't either.
South Lake.
We're,
So he's right
our
down the
backyard.
street.
Right down the
Yeah.
street, bro.
Oh, we gotta go.
Let's ask him that worship night.
We gotta go check him out. Man.
Let's go check him out,
We'll
bro.
invite him to the
Yeah.
next.
I don't know.
Yeah.
They might do some spontaneous worship.
Let's go.
Okay. It's okay.
That's awesome.
It's not spontaneous, really.
They're more organized.
And then I think all of these are pulpit for me. Beautiful Jesus by Passion. The beautiful.
For the record, I had put that in her head 'Cause
Yes.
It took forever. I was like, babe, this is a good song. She's like,
I didn't say it wasn't a good song. It
So
just
I played-
sometimes it takes me a minute.
it takes
to,
me a
like-
minute. So listen. If you want to do a song, here, listen to this. To your music director, just send them the song, right? Just program it in their head, and they're eventually gonna like it.
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
maybe that's not recommended,
I
but
don't know. I mean, well, you're married to her, so it's a little bit
it is
easier.
a little bit easier.
You know, if
but-
like somebody was like in someone's car, like, and just hit play on the song, like
maybe
who's
add,
in my car right
add
now?
the song to their playlist. So they
Yeah,
like,
that's
always
not
go on
creepy
there.
at all. Like, yeah, there was like, I'm just added myself to your Life 360, and yeah. Oh man, but the song is beautiful.
It really is.
It's
such a
amazing.
good song.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love the it to me. Okay, so there are some songs to me that are moment songs.
Mm-hmm.
This is a moment song.
Definitely.
It'll be tough to put into a. I mean, maybe not, but to me, if I'm thinking about putting it into a worship set, it'll be tough for me to place it.
Right. It is
Like,
tough to place.
you-
That's
you
why we
have
haven't
to-
done it yet.
You have to set it up
As
with
in-
the right song. Yeah, you
Yeah.
got to set up with the song before to try to create the atmosphere that it needs. But I think it's one to have in your back pocket just for moments.
Yeah.
Especially the bridge.
Yeah.
There's just something.
Yeah, I think it's an easy song to do the bridge on in multiple keys.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like just the bridge itself, this will
Yeah.
be a perfect tag.
Yeah, and I think like even just like male versus female, it's a good one to flop back and forth on.
Definitely.
You could do a male lead or a female lead,
Definitely.
depending on what you have available.
Mm-hmm.
So great song.
Great song. Man. Anything that speaks about Jesus?
Yeah, that's good. That's what we're hoping for.
Yes.
Microphone. Thank you so much for listening. And if you have any questions for our Q&A segment, I know you might feel a little shy after today's Q&A because that one got a little deep. And sometimes you may not like what you hear. But be sure to hit us up via Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. We want to connect with you. We're posting weekly content, and we hope to get to know you more. And we'll see you next time on Purpose Podcast. Have a good one.
All right, take it easy.